All right, let's dive into a really dramatic chapter of an ancient journey. And it's got everything. Huge battles, a full-blown rebellion, and, well, a pretty bizarre cure for a deadly problem. We're going to explore what happens when a nation's biggest enemy is actually itself. This is a story where the threats from the outside were just as terrifying as the meltdowns happening on the inside.
Okay, so picture this. Our story kicks off with the people of Israel on this absolutely grueling trek. They're trying to navigate around the land of Edom, and out there in the harsh, unforgiving wilderness, patience is running out fast.
And we're not talking about a simple march from point A to point B. This is a desperate day-by-day struggle for survival. They're in hostile territory, and literally every single step is a major challenge. And, it doesn't take long for that hostile territory to, well, fight back. Their first huge test comes when an enemy king, the Canaanite king of Arad, spots them coming. And he's not about to wait around. He decides to strike first. And get this, the situation just explodes. The moment the king of Arad hears they're on the way, there's no talk, no diplomacy, he just attacks. He even manages to capture some of the Israelites, which, you can imagine, creates a massive crisis right off the bat. So they're completely backed into a corner. What do? They make this incredibly serious vow to God. It's almost like a deal, right? They basically say, if you give us the victory, we promise to totally destroy their cities. And their plea is answered. The Canaanites are delivered right into their hands. And just to show how serious they were about this promise, they actually renamed the place they conquered. They call it Hormah, which literally translates to total destruction. So now it's not just a memory, it's a name on a map, a permanent reminder of the vow they made and what happened next. But that feeling of victory, it doesn't last long. See, their next big challenge, and you could argue it was even more dangerous, wasn't going to come from an enemy army. Nope. This one was going to rise from within their own ranks. This is the breaking point. The people's patience just snaps. All that stress, the constant hunger, the sheer exhaustion, it all just boils over. And they start speaking out, not just against Moses, but directly against God. They're complaining about having no food, no water, and just being utterly miserable. Well, the response to all this complaining is swift. And it's terrifying. The source says that venomous snakes were sent among the people. They're biting them, and many of the Israelites die. Their internal rebellion has just turned into a very real, very lethal plague. So now things are desperate. The people immediately realize their mistake, they repent, and they're begging Moses to pray for them. But think about it. What could possibly work against venomous snake bites out here? The answer he gets is not what anyone would expect.
So the cure? It's not a medicine. It's not some kind of ancient antidote. It's an act of faith. Moses is commanded to make a bronze snake, stick it up on a pole, and then tell everyone that if they get bitten, they just have to look at this thing and they'll live. It sounds wild, right? But according to the source, it worked.
Okay, so let's recap. They've survived an enemy attack and an internal collapse. This is a real turning point. The Israelites start to shift from this wandering, complaining group into a full-on conquering force, ready to take on the powerful kings standing in their way.
And you can see this new approach right away. They send messengers to Sihon, the king of the Amorites, with a totally reasonable diplomatic request for safe passage. But Sihon's response? It's not just no. It's, I'm gathering my entire army and coming to fight you. Talk about an escalation.
But even with Sihon's aggression, Israel pulls off this decisive victory. I mean, they don't just win the battle. They take over his entire land. They occupy all his cities, including his capital. This is a game changer. It's a total military conquest that turns them into a real power in the region. This win was so huge, it was actually immortalized in poetry. Ancient poets wrote songs about it, and you can just feel the power in the words. They describe the victory as this fire blazing out of Sihon's own capital, Heshbon, just consuming his enemies. It's really vivid stuff. And the poem wraps up by just celebrating this complete and total overthrow. It paints a picture of absolute demolition, really driving home the sheer scale of Israel's conquest and the fall of Sihon's kingdom. But wait, they're not done yet. Not by a long shot. After taking down Sihon, they look north. Their next target? another powerful ruler, Og, the king of Bashan. And, you guessed it, he also gathers his entire army and marches out to meet them for a fight. And the outcome of this battle is, if you can believe it, even more absolute. The source says they struck down King Og, all of his sons, and his entire army, leaving 0 survivors. 0. And just like that, they took possession of his land, completing their conquest of the region. So let's just step back for a second and look at the bigger picture. When you put all these dramatic events together, a really clear pattern starts to emerge. It's this cycle of near disaster, followed by an incredible, decisive victory. Yeah, check this out. You see this cycle over and over again. First, some huge obstacle pops up, an enemy king, a plague of deadly snakes. Then, the people take a very specific action. They make a vow, they repent and pray, or they just flat out fight. And what happens every single time? The outcome is either deliverance or a major victory. So, what's the big takeaway here? I think it's this. The story is showing us a group of people who are just constantly being tested. Tested by their enemies, sure, but also by their own failings. And what's fascinating is that their survival, at every single turn, seems to be directly tied to how they choose to respond to that crisis. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, about this deep connection the narrative draws between a community's actions and its ultimate destiny.